Delighted to have our great friend, Professor Russell Foster, back on the Performance People podcast, head of circadian neuroscience at Oxford University, author of over 300, would you believe, scientific publications, and the Sunday Times bestseller book as well, Lifetime, which talks about the new science of the body clock and how it can revolutionise your sleep and health. And he's also an advisor to us at Ainsley & Ainsley as well. So very, very happy to have this conversation with Russell about, let's focus on, Russell, in this next 15 minutes, midlife and sleep, which is a little bit selfish of me, but that's where I'm at. So that's what I want to talk about. And it's my podcast, so that's what we're doing, okay?
Well, great to see you again, Georgie. And of course, I've gone through midlife, I guess, by now. So, you know.
Only just.
Yeah, true, thank you. But I've had lots of experience of it, and I can tell you it's fine.
What are the greatest challenges facing us who are, entering midlife and sleep?
Well, I guess the first thing to say is that most people don't have a sleep problem. They have a stress or they have a stress or anxiety. And when we got to midlife, life is really complicated. We've taken on probably our most important financial burdens. We may have children. We may have parents that we're looking after. It's complicated. And so that produces a sort of a noxious brew that can influence our sleep. In addition to those stresses and anxiety activities, there are changes in sleep structure. So we tend, as we age, the circadian system, which is really important in regulating the sleep-wake cycle, its amplitude is getting a little bit less robust. So the precision whereby you're driving the sleep-wake cycle can be a bit more sloppy. And so, for example, you're more likely to wake up during the night, during midlife or older, than you were when you were perhaps a bit younger. But the key point is that different isn't necessarily bad. It's just being aware that sleep changes. I mean, here's so many people saying, oh, God, I wish I got the sleep that I had when I was 30. But you won't. It'll change. And as I say, different is not necessarily bad. It's all about managing it and not worrying about it.
Well, I think that's central, isn't it? I mean, certainly I've found that after children and, like you say, the responsibilities of a company, the responsibilities of, like you say, older parents now and young children, and the juggling act that comes with all of that, there's a lot to keep you up at night. There's a lot to worry about. So how much is it about managing the anxiety piece rather than just the sleep thing?
I think it's a big thing. And there's one societal change that we need to factor in, is that we've gone from living in extended families where there was an extended support group.
Yep.
There were aunts and uncles and
big families.
Big families. And you could sort of devolve some of the problems of life to the broader group. We've now shifted to the nuclear family, where it's usually just a couple that are dealing with all this stuff. And so that's another structural change. But you're quite right. It's all about managing that anxiety. And so at the end of the day, it is critical to step back and step away from the issues that are stressing you out. I know it's easy to say, and it is very difficult to shut down. But I mean, I was in the early days really quite rude about mindfulness. I had it in the same box as crystal waving. Now I apologize unreservedly for that attitude, because there's now some good scientific data showing that actually, for some people, mindfulness can be a great way of de-stressing and therefore getting better sleep. But it may be going to the gym. It may be doing your 80 laps in the pool. It may be a few pages of Jane Austen. It's whatever works for you. And that's why we've got to try lots of different things.
Why we talk a lot about the quality of sleep and better quality sleep rather than quantity of sleep. And you talk a lot about, sleep not being like a shoe size, it isn't one size fits all. And actually this idea of perpetuating the 8 hours is a must. And if you don't do that, you're in serious dire trouble and, or else. So why is quality sleep so important over quantity of sleep?
Well, I think it's important to define what we mean by quality of sleep, and it's our own perception of how good our night of sleep has been. And it's quite interesting if you measure sleep objectively and then ask people how well they slept, they don't always necessarily align.
Why is that?
I suspect it's because people are so anxious about their sleep. They'll default to, oh no, I had a terrible sleep, last night. Whereas in fact, they probably did perfectly well. And I have to say, one thing that I am slightly irritated about are some of the sleep apps. The sleep apps they will get better, and they can be useful in the same way that, if we want to lose weight, we change our diet, we weigh ourselves in the morning, we see that we've lost weight, and that reinforces our changed eating behavior. Same for sleep. It's very dynamic. If you want to have a longer sleep episode, if you need a longer sleep episode, then an app can tell you this. So when we go to bed, when we wake up, if we woke up in the night, is all very useful. But the apps are not sophisticated enough to get an accurate portrayal of our non-REM sleep cycle. And then they try and extract from that how good your sleep has been. And that can make people very anxious. I've had so many people come up to me and say, my app is telling me I've had terrible sleep. I kind of feel it's all right. Should I be worried? And the emphatic answer is absolutely not. Listen always to yourself, and try and get the sleep that you need. And it's also about listening to the people you spend your lives with. I mean, I suppose we should step back and say, well, how do you know if you're getting a good night's sleep? And the first point, and it goes back to your point about quality, is do you feel that you can function optimally during the day? That's a good metric of whether you slept well or not. And we all can relate to that. Do you oversleep extensively on free days, such as the weekend, or particularly when you go on holiday? That's suggesting you're not getting the default sleep, the biological sleep that you need. If you're dependent upon an alarm clock, or somebody has to get you out of bed in the morning rather than waking naturally from REM sleep. If you feel sleepy and irritable and fatigued when you're awake, that's not a good sign. If you crave a nap during the day, that's telling you you're not getting enough sleep. If you are dependent upon caffeinated drinks to drive the wake state, that's really not a good sign. And one thing is, where I started with this, is listening to the people you share your lives with. Are they commenting that you're a bit more irritable, you've lost empathy, you're doing stupid and unreflective things, you're more disinhibited? And actually, it's people really don't like to be questioned about those sorts of things. But it's a very good marker of your behavioral changes, listening to other people, and whether that might relate to a poor sleep, or you're not getting the sleep that you need.
And I guess in also midlife, what happens for women is it's the hormonal changes. So how much does that affect the dial?
Well, absolutely. And I just did a tutorial this morning with some students, and one of the essays is all about the relationship of estrogen and sleep. And we talked about the role of estrogen, which rises, of course, during the first half of the menstrual cycle. And estrogen is associated with more robust circadian drive. We know there are estrogen receptors in the master clock within the brain that can drive a more coordinated, solid output, and therefore a robust sleep-wake cycle. And also, because estrogen is associated with the release of serotonin, it can improve our mood. So if we then look at the other side, after ovulation, you get that rise in progesterone, and progesterone is associated with it has direct anti-anxiety effects, and it can actually promote sleepiness. So around ovulation, you're feeling great. You're feeling, robust sleep-wake cycle, you're feeling good, and you're, feeling sleepy. So sleep tends to be good. But then as estrogen and progesterone decline, and either side of menses, then you can feel pretty crappy, as many women, of course, experience with premenstrual and postmenstrual mood and behavioral changes and problems with sleep. And also the relationship between estrogen and core body temperature. The hot flushes that you get later on, of course, when you're perimenopausal and menopausal. So yes, going back to sort of midlife, those changes in those key hormones, which have now been linked to the biology of sleep and circadian rhythms, are really important. I would say that estrogen, progesterone, HRT, hormone replacement therapy, for some, but not all, does lead to better sleep. So it's something that if you're really suffering with, that you may want to consider. It's quite interesting that the sleep, the temperature ranges differ between men and women. women tend to prefer a warmer sleeping space than men, which can cause, quite big problems during midlife. And I remember going up and speaking to the mining communities in the Pilbara in northwest Australia. And they were saying that what saved their marriage is an electric fan, because the fan is blowing cool air onto the chap on one side of the bed, and the partner is on the other side of the bed, cooking mildly. So yes, there's big differences in temperature as well, and we're now getting a pretty good idea, not complete idea, of how those changes come about. So during the menstrual cycle, mice have estrous cycles. Women have menstrual cycles.
We are not mice. A reminder, Russell, we are not mice.
So, although similar
sometimes.
And then of course we can explain some of the behavioural and sleep changes during midlife as a result of all those changes that are going on.
And one of the things that I suppose is central to cellular recovery is sleep. When we were formulating night powder, the focus was very much on rest and recovery and what that can give you in terms of what your cells need when they need it most during that sleep cycle, so that when you're sleeping, fundamentally, very much our direction was our supplement isn't sleeping and those ingredients are doing what they need to do to recover the cells, rejuvenate the cells. How big a part does that play in the conversation as well, especially in midlife?
Yeah, well, it's a really important point, because what you find is that the first episode of sleep is associated with the release of growth hormone. Now, of course, we use growth hormone to grow when we're kids, but as adults, we need growth hormone for tissue repair, and it will mobilize all those pathways that are important for tissue repair. Interestingly, if you don't get deep slow wave sleep during that first half night, you can truncate growth hormone secretion really very considerably. So there's a very nice relationship between tissue repair, growth hormone, and the mobilization of the sorts of nutrients and resources that the body needs for tissue repair.
So the single most important thing that we need to know about midlife and sleep would be what? What do we need to take away most from this conversation?
It'll be different from when you were younger, but different isn't necessarily bad. Be aware that it'll change and put in place those measures that will allow you to deal with it. So if you do wake up in the middle of the night, as many of us do, then it's fine. That is probably the default human sleep pattern. And it's all about not getting anxious and just finding ways to relax. So my pet tip would be listening to Melvin Bragg and In Our Time on Radio 4. He's wonderful. I love the program. But there's something about that program that within 5 minutes, I'm back to sleep. And I have to listen the next day to find out what went on. So
I'm not sure that's considered a compliment.
I would hope it would be. But no, I mean, seriously, it depends on what works for you.
Okay, so whatever works with you, in your case, Melvin Bragg. I'll have a think about that, because I don't want to offend anybody by saying you send me off to sleep, but I know what you mean. There are certain things that you can be lulled into that sense of sleep.
And I think it's something gentle and unthreatening. Yeah. And, learning about Chinese porcelain in the 14th century, is fascinating, but not overly stimulating, for me, at least.
Russell, a pleasure as ever.
Great pleasure.